Okay, so here we are at day 2 of my foam helmet tutorial. Yesterday I cut out the patterns for the 6 pieces of my helmet. That's 2 pieces of brim that, do halves, and the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 quadrants. It goes together like a baseball cap, essentially. Yesterday I wasn't getting the curvature from the shapes, and I realized that was because I was trying to put it together as if it was flat on a table, which you don't. The reason that it's in 2 pieces rather than just one half of the helmet being a single sheet is that you need to curve them against each other to get the correct shape. So you can see, I've scribbled out that fold line, and I did a little experimenting, and we have a new fold line. So I've updated the pattern. This is what we were using yesterday. This is the new one, which I will upload with this video. You can see that exactly the same shape. Nothing we did yesterday has changed except how you stick the pieces together. I had to play around with my prototype, which when you download the pattern you won't have access to, so I'm trying to make it easy for you. So instead of having overlapping peaks that you're going to need to cut off, you're essentially joining it so that this, that line will be a single piece, and these segments will fold over each other until the top forms a single curve, and you can see that that's a much more satisfactory helmet shape. So that's just slight alteration of the pattern. Also yesterday I discovered that the brim pattern had a slight error. I did this 2 years ago, so a little hazy on the details when I went to draw the pattern. But what I had as the front was actually the back, or vice versa. And I also discovered, just through a bit of playing around, that this is to make a peaked front and a sort of smooth back. I discovered that if you flip one of these over, so you have a back and a front together, it actually makes a perfectly serviceable, might need to sand it across the curve slightly to make it consistent, but it's makes a decent flat brim. Or you could, you can do it peaked both ways if you want. So I've given, rather than definitively stating that one is the front and one is the back, I've called them A and B and given you some extra instructions, so you have the option of doing it basically any way you want. Anyway, this is the way I originally did it, and this is the way I'll do it, just for consistency. But I know what I'm doing now, so I'll probably edit quite a lot out of that first video. But just so I'm not confusing people. But I'm just going to roughly assemble these and then get the two halves and sew across the top, just as you would if you were making a pouch or a pocket or a baseball cap or something. Just get two halves, sew across the top. I've found that the best way to transfer the lines from your pattern onto this foam is to just draw across the top of the line on the paper over the and you can't really see because that's black, but there is a faint line, and I'm just going to use that to tell me where the correct overlay is to get the right curve, and that should give me all the information I need to assemble this, which I might also do the sewing line just so I know where it is. Okay, I'm just so you know how to connect these. What I've done is I've just taken a bit of masking tape and overlapped the two segments so that the top curve is more or less continuous, and the one that overlaps is basically this point is touching this point on the other segment. So you can see I've got the line drawn in there. I'll just flip it over so you can see. I've just taped it on one side. Now I'm going to do that on the other one, and I'll tape that in case you want to see it. But I think the best way to assemble the helmet, and this is a bit of an experiment because it's not what I did last time, but I don't think, is I'm going to assemble both of these, just a little bit of tape, and just assembled at the top, not the bottom. Sew the two halves of the helmet, so the two segments to the other two segments, and then when it's sewn together, I will bring this round and glue the two halves together to form the angle. Probably wouldn't be a terrible idea to have these set up so I can help assemble those. I probably won't show you how to sew it across, because if you know how to sew, it's self-explanatory, and if you don't know how to sew, that's a whole other tutorial. So first off, I'm just going to show you so I'll show you on this one because I've done this wrong. The one that I've labelled front, I want to what I've done wrong is I've marked out the wrong bits, so I'll do it backwards. That's the way to do it. I want to keep the one that's going to the front to have the overlap going this way. So I think that creates a nicer look. You can't see that I've done, because this is asymmetrical. One has the overlap going one way, one has it going the other way. I think this looks less neat. Doesn't really matter, but you know, just personal preference. If anyone ever takes you to task on why you did a costume a certain way, for my money, personal preference is always the final arbiter. That it's your costume. Do it the way you want. Okay, so that pretty easy. Just line the bits up, put a piece of tape across. It's not perfectly solid, because what I'm going to do is sew across all the pieces. There's kind of putting all your eggs in one basket there, but I'll sew across, and then I'll just peel the tape off from under the stitching. Because I don't particularly in this instance want to put pins in, because even the masking tape is roughing up the surface a little, so I don't want to put lots of holes. That one's... I could have, of course, changed my mind and put the one that I had listed as the front on the back. It's just confusing if there's already labelled front. So I've any line that I've marked in that I've decided I'm not going to use, I tend to scribble out just so I know that that's no longer the line I'm using. That's about as sophisticated as I get with my patterning. I just go, not using that anymore. Okay, so I think I'm going to have to put a piece of tape on both sides just to keep it neat until I carry it into the other room. I don't really need to be using that. I have stuff that's the actual thickness I want. So, as you can imagine, I'm just going to front to front and just brim is not assembled at this point. So now I need the wider stuff. Now I'm not going to do any sewing of the brim because it's thick enough that it holds its own shape. The reason I'm doing a bit of sewing on the top of the helmet is just for reinforcing purposes. It's if you want to. There's a fairly reasonable amount of. You can see it more clearly on the pattern. But there's a fairly reasonable amount of surface there. So if you want to use contact cement or something like that, whatever you're more comfortable with. This being a relatively cheap material compared to a lot of other things gives you good opportunity to mess around with it and not get things perfectly right first time. I'm trying to stick to the... I'm a little low on stock of this stuff, just because I haven't bought any for a while, and I do use a lot of it. But so I'm trying to use just one sheet and do the whole project without having to recut the pattern out of it, but needs must, you know. If I get to the point where I really mess it up, it's, you know, you've wasted $1 worth of material, and you haven't even wasted it because it's, you know, reasonable size. You can cut smaller designs out of it. It's, you know, it's I mean, if you wanted to put ridges, you know, bands across, there's a little doohickey here. This is actually designed for leatherwork, so it's not, this stuff isn't quite, but just, well, I was talking about, so this is a little bit of scrap tooling leather. You set it, there's a little ruler inside, you set it to the width you want, and if you've got a straight edge of leather, you run it up against the straight edge of the handle, and that's how you make belts and straps and things. Okay, I've just with a bit of tape, I've test assembled this top of the helmet, and I mean literally just the top seam, or what will be the seam. I'm just going to stick it in the brim because, as I said, the brim is thick enough to hold its own shape. It actually gives the entire shape of the helmet is more or less determined by the brim. Because this stuff is thin and this is thick. So that's the more structural element of the design, I suppose you would say. Okay, so that's starting to, you can see how this, when you start curving it in, will form different curves based on the on how you overlap the thing. We've already got our sort of idealized curve, which is just the 2 points touching. So I'm just going to tuck it into the brim to see how it looks. Always good to test fit things before you do anything irreversible. So just fine tune the fit, but I'm happy with that. That's why you're not happy on that side. That's reasonable. Again, you got, because the sides are open, it's wanting to pop in different directions, but just because you're going to have a ridge that's going to be in, sort of pushed in a little bit of compound curve. I'm just going to white balance camera. There you go. Turn it around then. But you see why I want the seam on the front. I suppose you could trim it to meet the center line, but then you have less material to hold both sides together. But I think that's going to work. It's worked before.